I want to do something different for that registration step. In the previous session, we added a registration step to our pipeline. Basically, we trained our model, we evaluated our model, and then we directly from the evaluation step, we registered that model. But what happens if the accuracy of the model is not good enough? So what happens if tomorrow we collect more data, we run our pipeline, and for some reason, the model does not perform as good as it should? We don't want to register that model. Instead, we want to fail the pipeline. So that is exactly what we are going to do today. We are going to include a new step in our pipeline that is going to check that the accuracy of the model is good enough for us to register that model in the model registry. Let's take a look at the code. Let's start with this small diagram here. And you can see how I'm sort of like inserting this condition step into my pipeline. So we're going to go from the evaluation step into this condition step. We're going to take the model accuracy, and this condition step is going to check the accuracy coming from the evaluation report against a predefined threshold. Okay, so we're going to set, hey, this is a minimum threshold. The accuracy of the model has to be at least that accurate in order for us to register that model. And if that doesn't work, if the accuracy is not good enough, then we are going to send our pipeline into a fail step. It's just a special step that SageMaker supports that is just going to stop the pipeline. So the registration is not going to happen. And that is great because we don't want to pollute our model registry with models that are not good enough. How do we accomplish this? Let's take a look here at the code. I'm going to start by defining a new pipeline parameter. Remember, we already have a pipeline parameter to identify the location of the data that we want the pipeline to process. We're going to create a new one. This time is a parameter float, and it's going to represent the accuracy threshold. So I'm going to call it accuracy threshold, and the name is going to be accuracy threshold, and the default value is going to be 70%. Again, this is just an arbitrary value that I'm using here to illustrate how this works. We have our parameter. When we define the pipeline, when we create the pipeline that we're going to run, we need to remember to pass this parameter so we can actually, use it as part of the pipeline. The next step here is I'm going to create the fail step. And like I said, this is a special step that SageMaker supports. It's called fail step. And we can pass an error message. So whenever it fails, we can just display why it failed. We can log that information. Notice that I'm using the join function again here, right? We used that before to create or to form a full S3 URI to a file. Now I'm using it to create my message here. And the reason I need to use this is because I need to concatenate a message string with the value of accuracy. And I'm going to use the function to do that. So it's basically the two values that I'm concatenating are this message, execution failed because the model's accuracy was lower than, and the value of threshold. So I'm going to be concatenating those two. And in the middle of those two, when the concatenation happens, I'm going to be adding a space. We already saw how this join function works before. Cool, awesome. So I have my fail step that I need to include in my pipeline. Let's now define the condition. When we create a condition step, we're gonna need to define the type of condition that we want to evaluate. In our case here, we're gonna be defining a condition greater than or equal to, okay? And there are multiple conditions that are supported by SageMaker. Actually, I have a link here. Let me click on that link. And on this link, if I make it a little bit bigger, you can see that we can use condition equals, greater than or equal to, less than. I mean, there's a bunch of options here that we can use. We can also use a condition or to combine multiple conditions. Cool, awesome. So I'm going to be defining a condition greater than or equal to because I want to make sure the accuracy of the model is greater than or equal to my threshold. That's why I'm using this one here. A condition has two attributes that we need to supply, the left value and the right value. So my left value is going to come from the property file that we defined. Remember that in the previous session, when we created that evaluation step, we mapped one of the output using a property file. And I mentioned during that session that was going to become useful later on. So here is how that's useful. We can use a new function that's called JSON get to grab values out of that file and use them as part of the definition of the pipeline. That's the reason we created the property file in the first place. So you can see here in this left attribute that I'm using JSON get to grab the value of accuracy from the JSON file. So the step name where this property file is coming from is the evaluate model step name, which is the step that we created in the previous session. The property file is the evaluation report. We defined that in the previous session as well. And the JSON path that's going to give us, is going to get us to the value that we want to compare against is metrics.accuracy.value. Remember, when we created that evaluation report, we set it up in a hierarchical way. So we had metrics at the top, then a child was the name of the property, in this case accuracy, and then a child that was value. And you can access it just using a period to navigate through that hierarchy. Okay, so this is gonna get us the value that we saved there. And then we're gonna compare that against the accuracy threshold, which is the property value. So we can compare this against this. Cool. That is our condition. Now we need to set up the condition step, which is going to use that condition. This is pretty simple to do. So you can see here, I'm using the condition step. This is the name. When we display the pipeline, we are going to see that name. The conditions that we want to evaluate is, in this case, just the condition that we define, the greater than or equal to condition. If the condition is successful, then we're gonna go to the register model step. If the condition is not successful, we're gonna go to the fail step. Notice that now we're referencing the register model step from inside the condition step. So that step, this step right here, this register model step, is only going to be called if this condition is successful. And if not, then we're gonna call the fail step. So if we go here to the creation of the pipeline, there are a few things that are different now. The first thing that is going to be different is that we need to pass the accuracy threshold. That is a new parameter that we need to supply to our pipeline. Before, we only had the dataset location. Now we have the accuracy threshold as well. Then we have the pre-processing step. We've had that for a long time. We have tuning or training depending on the value of this flag. We saw that before. We have the evaluate model step. And finally, we have the condition step. I don't need to specify the registration step again. Why? Because that registration step is defined inside the condition step. So it's being referenced inside the condition step. So I only need to specify condition step here. And if that condition succeeds, we're gonna call the registration step. If it doesn't succeed, we're gonna call the fail step. Everything else is pretty much the same. Notice that here, the session, I'm not using the config anymore to define the session. And the reason is because, remember, the registration step is not supported in local mode, so we cannot run this in local mode anyway. That's why I'm just specifying directly the pipeline session. So there is no way to try to run this pipeline locally here. I'm never gonna use the local pipeline session. I'm just using the pipeline session directly. If I execute this in my SageMaker account, let's go to SageMaker Studio. Let's go to the pipelines. That is session 9. I ran this yesterday. We are going to get something like this. So let's try to take a look here, make sense out of this. We have the pre-process data step, the train model, the evaluate model, and now we have the check model accuracy. This is the new step that we just added. And this step here, notice there are two branches coming out of it. One says true, right? I'm gonna try to make this a little bit bigger. One says true, and that is if the condition is successful, we are gonna be calling the register model step. If the condition is false, we're gonna be calling the fail step. If you look at this execution, you can see that register is in green, meaning it executed and it was successful. And you can see that fail is in gray, meaning it was never called. So the pipeline never reached this step, which is exactly what we wanted. Something else that I want to show you. I'm going to go back to the session 9 pipeline, which, by the way, I don't know if I've mentioned this, but you can also create an execution of a pipeline or start a pipeline right from the UI here from SageMaker Studio. You can click create, and now you can specify like the name of the execution, the description, and you can specify a value for the parameters. I've been doing this from the code, so that's why I've never used this UI, but if you wanted to kick off a pipeline right here from the UI, you can do it. Notice that now we have 2 parameters. We have the dataset location with a default value. This is where the dataset is located. And here we have the accuracy threshold. So if the accuracy is not 0.70, it's not gonna register the model. I'm just gonna try this. I'm gonna say that the accuracy has to be at least 0.99. And let's see, let's test condition step. Description, I don't care. Let me create this. Let's see what happens. Okay, I'm going to create this execution. I set the accuracy threshold to 0.99. It shouldn't work, I imagine. Okay, so this is trying. Is it working? Oh, it did not create it. Okay, that was probably my fault. Let me try this again. Create. It's just going to take a second, apparently, to create that execution. If this UI doesn't work, I've never tried it on the new SageMaker Studio UI. I've only used it in the SageMaker Classic UI, but they changed it. If this doesn't work, it says that it cannot create it. That's fine. I'm just gonna create it manually so we can see it working. And yeah, and let's try that out. If we go to running the pipeline, I'm gonna set this to, well, actually, let me go to this session and execute everything before here. So I'm gonna execute everything and I'm gonna start the pipeline with a new value for the accuracy threshold, which, by the way, I don't remember how to do that, but we can figure it out. So it's gonna look something like session 9 pipeline. There is a start function, and there is a way where we can specify parameters here. Must be like this, maybe like this. So if we pass 0.9, maybe it's going to look like this. Yep. So let's go session 9, session 10. Let's make sure we execute this line. Okay, so we define our pipeline. Let's try to run it now. Session 9, we're gonna start the pipeline and we're gonna pass this parameter and we're gonna pass this value here, 0.99. My goal is to hit the fail step, okay? So I'm gonna go back here. For some reason, the UI here is not working. That is just weird. All right, so it's gonna train the model now. It's gonna evaluate the model now. Let's wait for it. I will probably cut this video, wait for this to finish, and then we can see what the result is. Okay, so this finished, and look at this. Now it failed. So let's take a look at the fail here, and you can read the message. Execution failed because the model's accuracy was lower than 0.99%. That's good. That's awesome. That's what we wanted. Let's click on the check. Let's see the settings, the threshold 0.99. What else does it say? The outcome was false. Okay, so all of that good. What else can we see? Let's go to the evaluate model and let's see the settings. And here we get all of the information. I'm trying to find the evaluation output because I want to read what's in there. Okay, actually I can just look at the logs. Yeah, I don't need to worry about it. Let's look at the logs and see, well, there are a lot of logs. This is not gonna be as easy. Okay, there we go. So the accuracy was 0.80. Okay, that's the accuracy from the evaluate model step. That's why the check failed and it sent the pipeline to the failed state, which is awesome. That's exactly what we wanted. Hopefully this is helpful for you. You also learn how to call a pipeline passing a different value that is not the default value. And I will see you in the next session where we are going to start deploying this model.